Perfect. Oh, I have to press got it. All right. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I am so happy to bring to you from Arizona, Nikki Gomez Whaley from the Arizona School Boards Association, telling us about how nice and warm it is there. You probably have 20-ish participants here in the audience with us. There might be a few more people. Come on in, welcome. And Nikki's going to talk to us about building bridges to student achievement for each and every student. And I'm going to weave in information that's specific to Vermont and the Vermont School Boards Association as we go. And then toward the end, I'll tell you about some really exciting next steps for the VSBA and for our membership. So Nikki, anything else before you take it away? Anything the audience needs to know or?
Oh yeah, sure. I'll just give you a little bit of info. I think there was a bio for me, but I am at the Arizona School Boards Association. I'm on staff here and I do training and development and I lead our equity work. I am also currently serving my 5th year and on a school board here in Phoenix. It's a K-8 district, but about 20,000 students or so, 32 schools. And I have 2 children that are still in the public school system. So I'm very much rooted in public education. I have a background in both children and family mental health and human resources. So I bring that as well as the scope of working with schools. And I'm so appreciative of all of you that chose to be here today. I can't wait. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but I'll be in Vermont early November. And so I'm looking forward to that because I've had it on my bucket list to see some of your beautiful bridges, which is why I chose this name and I picked this picture. Does anybody know which bridge this is?
Can you hear that?
Windsor.
Say it louder.
Windsor.
Yes, it's the Cornish-Windsor Bridge in Windsor, Vermont. And so I put that one. There's several to choose. I picked the one that went with my color scheme. So, so I'm looking forward to getting started. So let's do that. What we're going to be doing a little bit today is showing you what the Leading for Equity curriculum is, Leading for Equity Pathways. It's a curriculum that ASBA created. Well, it's been started probably about 6 or 7 years ago, but we launched a full curriculum in 2020 and Vermont has been interested in looking at this. And so we wanted to give you an opportunity to understand first what is the board and district's role in addressing educational equity and how do you do that? Not just we need to do it, because I think a lot of us have been through things that it's like, yes, we know that we need to do something with this work. But how do you do that? And what is my role in progressing this work? So I'm going to share a little bit about that because this really is the pathway towards student achievement for every student. And so I want to start with a story about a burrito. How many of you enjoy burritos? I see just a couple hands. They're huge in the Southwest and specifically for someone of Latino or Mexican heritage. Burritos are staples and they are made with lots of food with the Mexican and Hispanic culture is made with love. So when I was little, my family lived with my grandmother and my godmother, and they would make homemade tortillas and beans. And I loved them. I didn't also know that that's also a popular food because it's so cheap and we were not very wealthy people. And so I was getting ready to start kindergarten and my grandma, I remember waking up, making me a bean and cheese burrito with fresh tortillas and beans and rolling it up so meticulously, first with a paper towel to keep in the moisture, to not let it get soggy, and then wrapped in foil to keep it warm. And she packed that with my school things and I went to my first day of kindergarten. And I was so excited because this was a whole new world. My mom chose to send us to a school that was further away, but a nicer school. She wanted to give us our best opportunity. And so I was there and I was just blown away. I mean, if you remember your kindergarten days coming in, you see all the toys, all the colors, the carpets are there. Ours had a little bathroom in it. I was amazed because our bathroom was outside in the house that I was living with. We had a shed outside our house that was the bathroom. This one had a bathroom in the classroom. I was in heaven. I was so excited for my first day of school and having such a good time. But then lunch came, and so we were all sitting on the tables, long tables on benches, looking at one another. And we all pull out our lunches and we began to eat. And I peel back the layers of my burrito, and I'm ready to dig in. And somebody's like, "Oh, what is that?" And I didn't know what they were talking about at first. And then I realized they were talking to me. And I was like, "Oh, like, this is a burrito. Like, how do you not know what these amazing things are?" Like, these are burritos. But at that point, they didn't know. Everybody else had their little, bologna and cheese or peanut butter and jelly. And then somebody else said, "Ew, like, that's weird." And then went back, as kindergartners do, and then just went back to their lunch. And I just remember thinking, like, this is the first time I realized that something from my family was weird and different. And it stuck with me. That was kindergarten. And I already knew, like, okay, there's something about me that makes me different from a lot of other people. And once you realize that you're different, you get self-conscious and you start noticing the other ways that you're different. And that's kind of how education went. I always loved education, but I always felt a little different because the situation and the surrounding was not exactly inclusive of my experiences and the things that I saw. And so I start with that story because it is so simple how easily and how quickly we can break inclusion, or we can start inclusion. And so what we want to talk about today is how boards can help and how school leaders can help increase student achievement by creating a system in which every student feels like they belong, every student feels like they're believed in, and every student has what they need to succeed. Because that's ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're here for. So what I want to start with, and Sandra's going to help me out, you can just think, you chose this for a reason. You had other choices, and I appreciate you choosing this session, but why are you here today? What brought you to this session? What is your interest? So I don't know if you want to maybe turn to a partner and share that. Some of you that are a little bit more private, maybe you just want to take a moment to reflect, but I'm going to give you about a minute, and then Sandra's going to help facilitate a little bit of sharing.
But one thing that, and there's a lot of more flooding. But and it's just tricky. I mean, I feel like I'm putting it which the last year at we anyway, it's funny. Like, I mean, if you do a real effort, like, right, that's fun, but also like, and like it's included in it's compensate for there not being a lot of people in our city, but it does. It creates enough.
Do we have anybody that may want to share? quickly before we move forward?
Yeah, I think so. Let me just check in. Great, everyone.
Right.
Nothing. And that's useful. Talk to each other.
But,
Lots to talk about. There's Eve.
really,
I wonder if there's anyone who would like to share why. Why today, why did you topic to come and why is this so important? And then what does, and or, don't have to answer both. Why does equity matter to you? Anyone want to volunteer? And please speak loudly so Nikki can hear you. What's your why? Why are you here today?
Well, myself and another school board member are here, and from the list, this and the one next door were the two most important, so we divide and conquer.
So these were your two.
Yeah,
Top
two
five.
of the was it four, I think, so
Yeah.
these were the top two that we felt were important.
Last House Supervisor Union, I'm on board. But we have a endorsed, approved equity policy endorsed by the teachers and the community representatives and the board under the umbrella of doing our equity work. And students are sort of running this committee. They sponsored a community-wide dinner last year for ethnic groups and so forth. Has good results, and they'll be presenting tomorrow with and as part of the students that are here.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, I'm also running a campaign of a person of color for representative of Morris. Nothing to do with the board.
Right. I don't know if you heard that. There's some students coming tomorrow. And they're from this board members district
But from a lot of other districts.
and from other districts, yes.
Anybody here because they just figure this word keeps coming up and it's not going away, so I better figure out what it means?
I think, and just speaking for both my district and the district here that we're talking with, equity is at the sort of the center of our work. And I think it's, the pandemic has exacerbated some of the vulnerable populations, and in our data shows that. And so that, you know, really being able to remove barriers, ensure belonging, and ensure that we're setting high expectations, but also all means all in addressing the learning needs of every student in the district to reach their potential is a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
one more. Can we have time for one more, Nikki? Sure. Okay.
So in Vermont, I think there's two ways to look at equity: internal in a district and external. And a lot of that has to do with funding, and then how do you make opportunities available for students. And so there's sort of two parts. You can, as a district, we can control to some extent our internal policies and approach to the concept of equity. And then externally, that's a lot more advocacy with state stakeholders.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about that at the end of our time today. Stakeholders.
Yeah, and so I want to highlight a couple things. Thank you, everyone that shared. I think a couple things that I want to highlight is one, I think equity has been something that a lot of those of us that have been with education have been hearing about for a while, but as somebody said, the pandemic impacted everyone. And so people, when we started coming out of that, wanted to know how far. And I think it was the first time for some people that they, because it was impacting them, that they realized, oh, it is impacting me, but it's impacting some of these other people even more. And so I think it brought to light a lot of things that were happening that maybe people weren't really aware of, or they knew about in theory, but couldn't put a face or a name to it. And a lot of folks during the pandemic were able to do that. And I like the thing that the other gentleman said at the end about the internal and the external. We are going to talk today very much about our sphere of influence, because there are things that are going to be outside of our sphere of influence. We're going to focus today on what you, and I promise I'm going to talk to you about the things that this curriculum is going to be able to do to put things to action and to start you wherever you're at on your path of making decisions, having the conversations that you're going to need to make the plans to do the action that is required. So I promise you we're going to get to that. And to realize that by doing that, we can then take the success that we get from that to do the advocacy on the outside. And so it's all about starting small, showing success, and then growing that and using that to leverage the next growth opportunity. So thank you all for sharing. I am going to go to the next slide, and we're just going to go quickly about a level set about equity. I think, you know, most folks at this point have a general understanding of what equity is, so I don't want to belabor it, but I want to give you the perspective that we use in doing this training. So I know that I did a presentation about a year and a half ago when things were a little bit more heated, and I called it the E word because it was just a word that was very triggering for folks. And so, you know, some people have chosen to not say equity; they'll just say like student achievement for all. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because while it's understandable, the word equity is really essential. And it's essential that we use it properly and not let it be misused or used out of context because it's essential to the work of school boards. Our primary responsibility is student achievement. At the end of the day, whatever it is, budget, policy, et cetera, are all means to an end of why we were elected as school leaders or why we were chosen as or hired as school administrators was because we were to represent and have the skills necessary to create an environment that is going to be supportive of our kids. That's why we weren't there to manage dollars necessarily. That was not why people voted for us. They voted for us primarily to manage dollars in a way that was going to give good outcomes. So, and whatever that is, because I think student achievement can mean different things in different communities. And so that's another question that I have is, you know, starting with the end in sight. Covey says, start with the end in sight. So I just want you to, and we're not going to take too much time with this. We're going to popcorn a little bit, but I want you to jot down for you, what are some things, when you say student achievement, what is it that you're saying you want for your students? What is student achievement for you and your communities? Just take a minute and then maybe shout out, and Sandra, if I can't hear too well, share some of the things that people bring up when they think about student achievement.
You want them to start now?
Yeah, pop out.
It's just popcorn. Just go, go, go. What do you think of?
I would say a strong sense of identity and agency.
You hear that, Nikki?
Yes, agency, identity, yes.
Acquiring the skills that you need to thrive in your independent life.
Right.
That is reading, but also social emotional regulation,
Mhm.
community connection.
Absolutely. What about reading, writing, and arithmetic? Is that part of it too?
Yeah.
Yes.
Some communities which were fixated on standardized test scores.
Yeah, and that can go awry, right? You know, you can have a focus on academic achievement and you can choose how you measure and you record that. So you're absolutely right, because those can sometimes lead us astray, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about data later and the ways that we can use data. But yeah, achievement is all of that. When we are looking at our students and when our parents and families are looking at what they want out of their school, they want their kids to feel safe and secure while they're with you. They want their kids to learn, you know, what they need to do to operate in society, reading, writing, arithmetic. They want them to learn how to get along with one another and other people. They want social skills. And I think somebody said it, they need support with creating an empowered individual that has agency and ability to think critically and participate in society, right? Our parents do a lot of that, but they're with us so much, we're kind of filling in the gaps of the civic pieces. They're in charge of the moral development, but we're in charge of the civic pieces. And so sometimes some people see that there's an overlap in that, but all of that is we're preparing people, our kids, to work not only in our communities, but in our country and in a global society, because nowadays our students are working remotely. They're working all across the world. And so we need to prepare our students to be able to navigate those situations. And student achievement can be all of those things. So let's talk a little bit about the barriers, like what are the challenges that we have? This is an important slide that I reference a lot. And I think that it's important because it really shows people how this all feeds in together. So we talk about the things that are outside our scope of influence. Our students are coming to us with all kinds of different influences, characteristics, circumstances, and experiences. And they may have one or many of these things that are listed. And yes, we're going to talk about the fact that race and ethnicity and gender identity and sexual orientation are really big ones right now. Those are the ones that tend to be more controversial. But there's so much more that are involved with this. Even if you have, and we're going to talk a little bit about, even if you don't think that you have differences, there are so many of these things that are invisible. We don't know about people's disabilities. Many disabilities are invisible. We don't know about people's immigration status or that of those in their household. We don't know about whether or not they have their basic needs met for shelter, food, emotional well-being, if it's safe in their neighborhoods, if they feel safe in their homes. We don't know if there's a space where they do have that caring, acceptance, and understanding. We have people that are in rural areas that may not have in proximity to libraries or mental health services or different resources. So when we talk about all the things that our kids are going through, those are the things that can lead to inequitable access. And those are inequities, right? So when we're talking about access in our schools, we are not just saying, you know, can they come to our building? We're past, you know, Brown versus Board of Education. Now, you know, there's different ways that we segregate now, but yes, legally we cannot, you know, reject people from coming to our schools. But when we talk about access, just being in the building is not enough to guarantee that student achievement that we identified, that people are learning, that they're growing, that they're connecting. And so we also have to know what is the quality of the building and the teachers and the materials that they have access to. What resources and opportunities are offered, and are they offered to everyone? Are they offered based on ability or based on income levels or based on school district? Even if we put a child and they're in the best facilities possible, are they able to effectively receive the instruction and the benefit of that environment? Meaning, did they come to school hungry? Are they dealing with trauma? Did they have to, you know, did they not get any sleep last night because of whatever was going on in the home, or it took them 2 hours to get there because of transportation issues, all of those things. And then does the environment feel like they are included and safe? Like me, did I feel like I belonged in that environment enough that I could proceed? Because that one situation didn't make me feel like I didn't belong at school. But those things, if we allow them to continue to grow and one after another, they pile up, and eventually our students may feel like school is not for them, or they're not one of the ones that are included. And all of that access is going to impact our outcomes. It's going to impact the student achievements, whether it's academics, attendance, behavior, who is succeeding and getting awarded and recognized, and who's being left out or ignored. And so why that matters is because we don't have any influence over what's coming into us. We don't have any influence over what's their characteristics, circumstances, and experiences, but we have a responsibility to ensure that they have access in all the ways that we described, and that access, we're measuring its success by whether or not everyone is seeing the same outcomes that we expect or hope for our kids. That doesn't mean everybody has the same outcomes, but the same level of success or acceptable levels of success that we would want for any of our students. And that matters because we know how important education is in the long-term outcomes of our families. We have the opportunity to break generational poverty. We have the opportunity to break generational trauma. We have the opportunity to change the whole future of future generations. I think of my kids now. I think of that little girl in kindergarten eating beans every single day and going to the bathroom outside in a bath in a tin bowl with boiled water, to my kids having TVs in their rooms and, you know, having everything that they need. And that's going to be different for them and their kids because wealth has grown over time. So when we talk about equity, we're not just saying, hey, we need to get kids to graduate and we need to get them to go to college or get careers. But we're talking about we need to set them up, and we're probably the best people suited to change lives. And that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day, because education changes lives. So what is equity? this is our definition at ASBA, similar to across the board. But at the end of the day, educational equity is about the fair allocation of resources based on need to address opportunity gaps and promote equitable outcomes, not equal, but equitable outcomes for all students. That's what it is. At the end of the day, that is exactly what it is. It is not about thinking that one group is innately bad or oppressive. It is not about watering down expectations so that we're just passing people along. It's not about blaming or shaming educators or parents or anyone else. It's not about, well, we're going to take from these people and give it to these other people. And it's not about punishing anyone. It is about believing that every student is capable of success given the right environment and resources, recognizing that our students have different strengths and needs, acknowledging that our opportunity gaps that are resulting in these achievement gaps exist in every school system. And I say opportunity gaps because when we say achievement gaps, it makes it seem like there's something deficient with the student. And we really are responsible for those achievements. So it's really our responsibility. It's an opportunity gap. There's something that we're not doing that is preventing us from working with that child. And then making sure that everyone has what they need to be successful. So for those that are visual, this is one of my favorites. It's from the Wood Johnson Foundation. But it's about the right tool, right? You could give everyone the same bicycle, and depending on their size, their abilities, it may not be effective for them. And when we give everybody the right tools, they still may not be as fast. There still may be differences, but at least they have what they need to be their 100%. So I'm going to pause here for a moment, and I'm going to ask you to think about your mission statement. I'm not going to quiz anybody to memorize their mission statement. I wouldn't do that to you, but I want you to think about, what does your mission statement say? Let me see if anyone looks like this. The mission of our school district is student achievement, preparing 80% of students to become responsible, successful contributors to our diverse society. Anybody's look like that? No? What about at ABC district, we believe 2 out of 3 ain't bad? No? How many of you have something that says every student, all students, we're going to make sure that they all get there? We want 100% of our kids to succeed, right? So we have to remember that our mission statements are our promises to our community. And if we don't have 100%, even if we're at 95%, we have not fulfilled our promise. And we can't continue to be okay with 80% or 2 out of 3, because that is not what we are saying we're about. And if that is what we're okay with, then we need to change our mission statements and be more truthful about what it is that we're preparing to do for our communities. And so that brings us to the long tail. I had talked about earlier that we may not see them. Sometimes the inequities or the gaps are really easy to see, right? If we look at our data and we see a huge gap in the discipline rates or the attendance rates of a certain population, we can see those pretty easily. But sometimes there's a lot of little ones. We may only have a small school. We may only have 1 or 2 kids that have these inequities that are impacting them. But because we don't have a metric to capture them, they go unnoticed. I want you to think about when you go to pick up coffee or tea, if you're a tea drinker, and you go into the store and there's like 45 varieties, right? And you can get them in a pod, and you can get them in a bean, and you can get them pre-ground. And you're like, it's all coffee. Like, why would I? And everybody wants either Folgers or Starbucks. So why have all these other ones? And the reason is even if only a few people use all of those other brands, at the end of the day, they're going to sell more of that than just the main major brand. That's why they continue to stock them. And so when we flip that to equity and inequities, we may not have any glaring huge problems that we need to tackle. And so, but that doesn't mean that they're not a bunch of little ones that when you add them up together are impacting our ability to reach those levels and those goals that we want in terms of student achievement. And so just because, you have a 93% graduation rate and the state average is 83%, that's amazing. But who are that 7%, right? Who's not graduating? And if 85% of those are young men or a certain race or those that are experiencing homelessness, then that's a big problem. That means that the majority of people that are not succeeding are in a particular group, and there's something that you can do about it. Because again, it's all about looking at what's influencing them and are they getting the access. And I think at this point we can say that there is no one size fits all approach. You can put a kid in the best STEM classroom, you can give them the best books and materials, but if none of the materials look like them, or they don't have food at home and they're too hungry to focus, or any of those other things, just giving them access is not going to be enough. There's something more that we're going to need to do. And that's what our job is as the educators, is once they get to us, our job is to identify the needs and then to meet them. And so before I go any further, I want to kind of just check in with folks, and I'm going to ask Sandra to help me because everybody is about this big right now. So I want you to raise your hand if you agree with the statement and keep it raised if you continue to agree. If you don't agree, then you can put your hand down. But raise your hand if you agree that student achievement and positive student outcomes must be our central focus as school boards and school leaders. Raise your hand if you believe that there are opportunity gaps in every school and that it's our job as school board members, number 3, to address those opportunity gaps in regards to their impact on outcomes. So we believe that
Majority. Still the majority.
Good. Okay. So the first one is that our focus should be on student achievement. The second one is we acknowledge that not all of our students are achieving and that there are some that are falling behind. Third, we acknowledge that we as school board leaders or administrators have a responsibility to do something about that. 4 is that we know we can't do that just on our own, that we need to build relationships with teachers, families, students, communities, that this is not something that the board is going to fix by themselves or the administrator is going to fix by themselves. And then 5 is that this is going to take time, that it's a journey. It's not going to be like, okay, by next year, we're going to fix this all. That this is something that is not going to be fixed with a single training or a year of implementation.
We agree.
Okay, so what we call here, this is the foundational premises of equity, but if you took equity out and you said the foundational premises of student achievement, it would still be true. I could take out the E word and say the foundational premises of student achievement, and all of that stuff would still be true. Because we can't fix something if we don't acknowledge that some of our kids aren't achieving. We can't fix something if we don't own the responsibility of having to do that. And so, yes, I have equity in there, and we call these the non-negotiables of equity work, because if you're not on board with all 5 of these things, then you have to question why. What is the one that you're sticking on? Because all of these are going to be needed to authentically engage in real systemic change. And then I'll leave this section with this. It's a Native American proverb, a Navajo proverb. You can't wake a person who's pretending to be asleep. At a certain point, it's no longer a knowledge gap. It's a, I don't want to know. I don't want to tackle. And so I say this because you can't wake a person that's pretending to sleep. If they don't want to get it, they're not going to get it. But I think that you start with a coalition of the willing, you demonstrate success, and you build from there. So I put that out there to say that sometimes you're going to be a lone wolf driving this work, forcing these conversations. Sometimes you'll have a team. Sometimes you'll have part of a team. In any of those situations, the work that I'm going to go through later will still help you, because you can still do this work whether you're on your own or whether you have the whole system behind you, because that's how it's broken down. And the important thing is to keep moving it forward, because sometimes it will take one person to do the work. I will tell you, for my board, I've been talking about this for 5 years, and it's only been in the last year and a half that we're actually starting to get the reports. We're actually starting to collect the data. And it's because of consistency. It's because the pandemic, I think, opened some eyes. And to be honest, there was a change in board members where there was an agreement that, it was time for us to address these things. But with all of those things, I had still been laying the groundwork. And so when it came time, people were like, okay, yes, we can go back and we can use those resources. So we're going to do another participant poll. I'm going to let Sandra do that again because I can't see hands. And there is no shame. This is just self-reporting. If you wanted to just kind of put it in your head, but otherwise I'm going to ask you with your fingers and make sure you're careful with which fingers you use. How ready do you feel like your district is to take on this work realistically? Hold up a 1 if you say there's initial talks happening about among some interested people, but nothing's started. Hold up 2 fingers if you think it's been identified as a priority, but little work has begun or people are not really sure what to do. Hold up a 3 if you think that, you guys have a plan, you're working on it, things are starting to happen. 4 if you think that it is a clear goal communicated throughout the district and everyone's consistently working on it. And then 5 if you just were like, I'm just here to tell you all the things you did wrong because we've got it nailed.
Where are folks feeling like they're at? Several 3s and 4s, couple 1s, 2s. Did I miss a 5? Is anyone feeling like you could be here with Nikki presenting? Yeah, great, thanks. Lots of 3s and 4s.
My district's not a 5. I'll be honest. I mean, I think that we are probably, and the funny thing is when we do this work, I do a pre and post test. And what people rate themselves at the beginning of the training and what they rate themselves at the end of the training when they realize how much goes into the work sometimes change. So if we have time, I might take that poll again. But I would say that our district is more in the 3.5 range, if I'm honest. And that's after years of, talking about it. So it is stuff that takes time. So let's get into what do you need to build the system? What needs to happen for the changes to start happening? This is what we call the essential components of an equitable system, right? So what are the cogs that need to be in place in order to move, to be a well-oiled machine? What are the things that you need to make sure that this is happening? The first component is a vision. You have to have a shared vision of what equity looks and feels like. You have to understand what is student achievement, what do we want to see for every kid, and how do we get there, right? So that first thing is just a vision. What do you want for every single kid? The second part is understanding where you're at, what's going on, where are opportunities, where do we have gaps in understanding. What are the issues at play that maybe we didn't realize were going on, and what do we need to dig into? The third thing is removing barriers to engagement, and that's engagement across the board, removing barriers to engagement with students, removing barriers to engagement within the hierarchy of the district structure, where leaders at the district level are really working with the site-based teachers and leaders to have this shared understanding of what is needed and not putting up those barriers of, well, we're at this level and we'll survey you, but the decisions are coming from up here. The other one is to have intentional and measurable goals. You can't just be shooting in the dark. You have to know what you're aiming for, and that has to be continuously revised. And then the fifth part is the accountability. You have to keep the open, honest review process. You have to keep going back and looking at this and saying, hey, that worked, it didn't work, and how do we keep moving forward? When you have all these cogs in place, they move together to work the system, as long as you're continually doing that, as long as you're continually looking at the vision. And when things get mucked up and those cogs stop spinning and working, that probably means that you need to go and tinker with one of those components because something's amiss. And that's going to happen in equity work. We say equity work is a journey, not a destination, because if you ask my mom, who grew up in the 60s and 70s, she thinks everything is great now compared to where it was with her. But if you ask many of our parents now, and if you look at the data now, we know that there's still more to do. And so our idea of what is an equitable system is going to change as our families and our communities change. So what do you do about it? All right, Nikki, you got me. I'm sold. We need to build a system. How do I do it? That's where the framework comes in. So the framework is a tool that districts use to start to build up those components that we just talked about. How do we start making it that we have a system that is ready to propel us in that equitable, in that space of equity? And so that's where the framework comes in. Our framework, we call it the Leading for Equity Pathways. There's 5 things that districts can do to begin to unpack their system and identify the ways in which they can start to rebuild or adjust in order to get the outcomes that they want. And so what I'm going to do here, and I'm checking on time. I go to
2:15.
Okay, so I have about a half hour.
Yeah.
Hi. And I want to leave times for questions. So why don't, before we dive into this, let's take a break for questions, because I don't want to steamroll right through. I want to take a break for questions. So is there anything out there?
Anything on your minds for Nikki at this point before she?
Yeah, I'm curious if the framework is means for the board to do their work, or is it a building-based, district-based kind of work? Framework?
It's the framework for the boards to do their work, or is it building-based, district-based kind of work?
It really can be used at all levels. It was designed for a governance team. So it was designed for the conversations with the board and the superintendent or cabinet level group, because we really wanted boards to understand how can they move this work and stay within their roles, right? Because some of this work is going to need to be done at the level of the campuses, and that's outside of our scope. So this is really about how can we set up what boards do, which is the expectations. Boards set up expectations. They ask and verify. So what questions do they need to be asking or looking at to verify progress? And then how do they hold themselves and the system accountable? And then how do they demonstrate that accountability across the board? So this is going to be what you can do as a governance team. But if you took this work and you tweaked it a little bit, it could be used throughout a district system. They would just have a different frame of reference. The questions might be a little bit different. But that's a great question.
I don't see any questions right now, Nikki.
Okay, so we're gonna dive in. So defining equity within your community, that's really getting into what we were talking about earlier. We're gonna talk about digging into data. We're gonna be talking about practicing cultural AHA, which is awareness, humility, and agility, embedding equity system-wide, and then demonstrating your commitment. And so I'm gonna go a little into each of those. Defining equity within your community. So this is about how equity and equality can often be interchangeable. And you'll have people in your community that don't understand, like, why can't we just give everybody the same thing? And so the first thing is to get everybody on the same page and understanding what the mission is, what the vision is of what we mean when we say student achievement, what we mean when we say equity, and what that looks like and what it doesn't look like. But mostly focusing on what it does look like, because everybody wants to bombard with all these assumptions of what it is. And I think for school leaders, it's important to focus in on what it is for you, because you're going to get caught up in having these conversations of, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. This is what we're doing. This is what we mean when we say this. This is what it looks like. And funny enough, many of you, I don't know if I have the slide in here, but many of you are already implementing equity strategies. The federal government has helped you do that. How many of you have Title I money or title money? How many of you have McKinsey-Vento? I know for homeless and homeless youth. How many of you have food pantries or clothing boxes that you do? How many of you have invested in social workers or people to help kids with their emotional needs or partnered with health facilities? How many of you have differentiated learning or implement IEPs? We already do equity work. And this is all we're doing. All we're doing is saying, hey, beyond just academics, there's other ways, there's other inequities in our system besides just the academic inequities. So I think it's really important that we focus on what we are doing and not trying to fight with what, accusations of what other people think that we're doing, just sticking with a shared vision of this is what we're trying to achieve. Because I think this says it all. Equal is same, equitable is fair. And as the bicycle image shows, equal is not always equitable. If we give everybody the same, it's going to work for some, it's not going to work for everyone. And again, if our mission is everyone succeeds, not 2 out of 3, then we have to acknowledge that differentiation is going to be a part of this. The next part is digging into the data. Data is hard. As school board leaders, I know we sometimes get no data, or sometimes we get inundated with data that we really have no context or understanding of. We just get spreadsheets and numbers and all of these things. So a big part of the board's role is to begin to understand what data they need in order to measure success. And we're going to talk a little bit later about establishing goals, but what would you need to see? What information would you need to know in order to see, to be sure that success or progress is happening? Because data can take different forms. I would say foundational knowledge is just knowing who you serve. Who are the students that we serve? What are their demographics? That's foundational knowledge, but it's not the only kind of data that we're looking at. We need to be looking at both quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative data is going to be your test scores. It's going to be your poverty scores. It's going to be how many are on free and reduced lunch, how many girls versus boys, how many in different racial demographics. That's all quantitative data, and that can give you some information. But if you say, okay, 8% of these students are Latino, and that's all the information that you use, you're setting yourself up to make some assumptions there. And if that's the only data point that you use, and you make assumptions and you start doing implementations just based off of that, you're more than likely going to miss the mark, right? You need to ask more questions or provide questions in context. So if you do see that 80% of Latino students are struggling with a particular area, you may want to add the qualitative data in, which is, at what schools or at some schools are they doing better? Like Latinos, 100% of the Latinos at this school are doing great. So what's happening there? Or our special education kids are doing great in this area, which is out of, the average across the district. What are some of the qualitative things we can ask about what's going on in the classroom? Can we talk to the students themselves? What's going on in the families or communities? What other information do we need in order to ask more? So we say data is a flashlight, not a hammer. I say board members, it's all about supporting your administration. You don't want to be into a conflict with them, but as representatives of your community, you are needing to check and verify, right? And verify doesn't mean did you do it? Yeah, you did it. Okay, great. It's asking the questions and asking for the proof, the demonstration, whether that's quantitative or qualitative data, to say, yes, it's happening, and this is how we know that it's happening. And you as board members need to say, what do you need to see? Because that's the information that the administration should be giving you. If you don't think that what they're giving you is enough, so say they're only giving you information in averages, here we have 17 schools, and on average, our 3rd grade reading is 87%. Okay, great. But when we break them down, we have a school that's 90%, 75%. So as a board member, you might say, I don't want aggregate data. I want to see 3rd grade reading scores by site. If you're a single school, maybe you want, you get into the data issues of, not enough kids. What are some groups that you can break down? So maybe it's not grade level, but it's English scores across the whole campus. And just start being creative. How can we get a little bit more drilled in on the data? And how can we get a clearer picture instead of just trusting on the averages? Because if we continue to trust on the averages or just rely on quantitative data, we are not going to find those long tail, all those other ones that aren't glaringly obvious. The 3rd part is cultural awareness, humility, and agility. We don't know what we don't know, right? And so cultural awareness is just knowing that culture is more than just race or ethnicity. We all have culture. We have the culture that we grew up in, which could have been influenced by our socioeconomic status, our religion, our neighborhood, whether we're, native to Vermont or whether we came from somewhere else, from another state. So we have to understand that all of that stuff is cultural awareness, and that we can't possibly know everything about people's cultures. So when we want to really celebrate folks, we need to ask them, what are the pieces of their culture that are important to them? And when people tell us, we need to listen. We don't go, well, that's just that one person, or, oh, well, most of us are okay with this, so let's just keep going on. If we truly mean 100%, we need to work our best. Now, there's always going to be the outliers, but our efforts should always be to make sure that it's 100%. And that requires agility, right? It can't be like, okay, well, we'll work on that 4 years from now when that family is gone, because guess what? A new group of students and families are there, and they may have something else that's important to them. So cultural awareness, humility, and agility is about recognizing that even if you went to those schools, right? They're not the same schools they were when you went there. Even if your kids went to those schools, it's not the same school as when you went there. I am coming to the age where I'm in my 40s. I'm like, wow, I used to think that I was ahead of the game and all this knowledge. And there's young people in their 20s that are putting me to shame in terms of their advocacy and their knowledge around some of this stuff. Because the idea is they're growing each generation, or things change each generation and priorities shift. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, back when my mom was in school, she just wanted to be allowed to go to school and not be bullied and not be hit for speaking Spanish. And that was her level. That's all she was looking for, right? She wasn't worried about being accepted and supported and encouraged to go to college. When I came around, I was like, no, not only do I expect not to be hit, but I also want to be accessing AP classes, which I wasn't. I had to fight to get access to. Now we've got places where AP is accessible to all, but when they're in there, they don't feel like the culture or the curriculum is reflective of them, and they don't feel included. So as things get better, there's going to be the next level, and we need to be agile as school leaders to recognize that what we knew may change and things will adapt. So 2 slides that I want to hand out here, and all of this stuff is in the curriculum that we do, and it's a longer process. It's something that we do with teams, and we focus on their own data. But I'm just giving you a really overview of the process and what this, the types of conversations that this workbook will help your districts have. Part of cultural awareness is understanding the difference between involvement and engagement. I love this quote, and I got to move my box so I make sure I read it correctly. But it's from Larry Ferlazzo, who is a community teacher and organizer, I think from California, but he has written a lot of books on education, K-12 education and family engagement. And he says that a school striving for family involvement often leads with its mouth, identifying projects, needs, and goals, then telling parents how they can contribute. So we want you to come to the canned food drive. We want you to come to our carnival. We're going to do a fundraiser, and this is what we need you to do. A school striving for engagement, on the other hand, tends to lead with its ears, listening to what parents think, dream, and worry about. So those thinking sessions, we want to hear from you. What would you like to prioritize? The other thing that it's important when we talk about this work is, oops, I went off the slide. Give me a second. Here we go. Is tokenism versus authentic engagement. A lot of folks, their first level, when they say, hey, we don't have great representation, or we don't see the diversity that's in our schools in these committees or on these decisions, or who's coming to parent-teacher conferences. And so it becomes like, well, we need to have somebody. And that can lead to tokenism, which is making a dutiful or symbolic effort. Well, we have one student on this committee. Well, if you say student engagement is priority, and you have one student and 27 adults, is that student engagement or is that tokenism? Authentic engagement is when you really take an active and collaborative role with working with that group to tackle shared challenges and opportunities, and making them and empowering them to be part of that process. Our 4th pathway is embedding equity system-wide. And this is really just about setting your plan, making it not just a goal at the board level, but how is this strategic goal, how is this policy get played out in the finance department? How does it get played out in the maintenance department? How does it get played out in the human resources department? And not just the classroom. We think about it as the district and the classroom, but it's a system, right? And all of those things interact. And so if we're not working with, if this is our goal, our strategic goal, then we need to align it throughout our system. We need to make sure that every department, every staff person understands how they are contributing to the vision, mission, and values of the district and what piece they play in building the system. You don't have to make it explicit, but you do that through demonstrating your commitment, which is setting goals and then holding yourselves accountable to it. Remembering that it's not work that we do to our community, but for our community. When we demonstrate our commitment, that means putting ourselves out there. It means vulnerability, because we can't just all say, well, our goal was to adopt a policy and create a strategic plan and do some PD. Check, check, check. We are a 5 on equity. And then you talk to your teachers or your parents or your families, or you do a culture survey and you realize that a large portion doesn't feel like the work is getting done. You may have given yourselves an A+, but the people who are impacted, the people that you supposedly did the work for, is not in alignment with you. So you have to demonstrate your commitment by putting yourself out there and saying, hey, this is what we did to fix the problem. This is what we see as a progress. We think this is great. What do you think about it? Do you see it the same way that we do it? The other thing boards need to do is ensure that they're holding their superintendent accountable. It can't just be assumed that they're going to use this lens in all that they do. There has to be a metric. You measure what matters, right? And if it's not in the evaluation embedded, whether it's embedded through all the different pillars of a superintendent's position, you know, the leadership part, the financial management part, et cetera, or just a standalone goal that you measure and have some metrics around. It has to be included in the responsibility of your leaders, both as a board and your superintendent, or it's just not going to stay focused. It's not going to happen, because we all know we're busy people. And when we come to our own jobs or our own families, if it's not on our top priority list, then it's the things that get pushed aside. And unfortunately, this work is hard. It's uncomfortable at times. And so it's very easy to say, oh, like, let's just not do this. So if we don't hold ourselves accountable in a very public way, the work will begin to fizzle out and die. And what you do when that happens is the people that began to trust you and began to see the light are not going to trust you the next time around when you decide to pick it back up. And so we have to be intentional when we do this work. So just to give you an overlay of the framework, you can start in any one of those areas. The way that the training is worked, the way that the workbook is designed, is that you can pick any one of those pathways that makes sense to you. So maybe your first thing is, what do we want to, what is equity? Everybody we have an equity definition, everybody is on board. So we really want to start on embedding it system-wide. What are our goals? How can we begin to get this throughout our system? Maybe you don't have a shared equity and you want to start there. Maybe you have a shared equity, but you want to test that against some data to make sure that you're on the right path. So wherever you want to begin, you can choose that pathway. And what you're going to find is some think about questions that are going to get the brain going about what questions should I be asking to assess if this is going well? What can I do as an individual versus what a board can do? Because there are things that we can do. We can individually advocate. We can individually ask for questions and data and reports. But as a board, we can make decisions and policies, et cetera. So where are you and what can you do about that particular situation? And once you started and you feel like you're in a good spot, what can you do next? How can you go a little bit deeper? If you're doing it really great at the district level, maybe you want to go deeper and make sure that it's really happening at the family level or the student level. It's questions like these. Does our district leadership understand the difference between equity and equality? If you're going to dig deeper, it will be, how do we share and create opportunities for all of our stakeholders to also be on the same page with our definition and vision? And then it'll say that we'll navigate the conversation about, as a personal, I can suggest the leadership team discuss equity as a study board or a study session topic, or as a district, we can establish a committee and have them work on it. So we'll talk through things like that. We'll use scenarios to help people kind of understand and put this into practice. What would this look like? So this is an example of the difference between equity and equality. A district received a grant for free preschools. A couple of schools, I want that. We're here, we're putting in the effort, we're showing up to all the meetings, requesting it. And then you want to go and give it to a school that didn't have any parents come and request it. That doesn't seem fair because it's not equal. We're here, we should get it. But the equitable thing is who needs it most, right? And maybe those parents aren't there, but it could be because they're the ones that need that service the most. So we walk through scenarios that help put that theory into practice. And then we end with what's the plan? What's your district's plan? Where do you want to start? Who's going to be your coalition of the willing that's going to get this work started? And really use the workbook and the tools that come from the training to guide your own district. Because that's the idea is you use these tools, we share these tools with you, and then we can facilitate that. And when I say we, I'm saying we with Vermont, because I'm going to switch over to Sandra, who's going to share with you what this means for you, right? What is coming for you? What's available for you? So Sandra.
Thank you. Thanks, Vicki, for everything you've shared with us. And I know it was a ton of information. You should know you're going to keep hearing about this framework for quite some time. So Nikki and her colleagues walked our board of directors through the framework 2 years ago, I think, with our board of directors. So several of our leadership individuals within the VSBA have already walked through the framework and are very familiar with it. We also have been hearing from some school districts that they're ready for this work, and we were feeling like we need a little bit more. We need some more resources. So beginning of November, Nikki's actually going to travel to Vermont with a colleague and work with a cohort of 25 of us, teaching us the curriculum, walking us through the curriculum, and then a third day for a group of trainers. So a train the trainer day, so that we will have capacity then to be out supporting school boards across the state. Capacity means people as well. So just the beginning of this week, we did some interviews. We recruited a couple of equity consultants who have some experience in facilitating group conversations, particularly when they might get a little tricky, a little difficult to navigate. They're going to walk through the training with Nikki and her colleague with us. So we're all going to be doing that the first week of November. And then somebody talked about some earlier, and I was writing down quickly all the stakeholders that are also going to attend this training with us. And I have to say, I don't know if ever I have coordinated something and invited a number of people and had 95% of people say, I'm committing my time and I'm going to be there. So I just want you to know, here are the stakeholders who have made a commitment to come to 2 days of training with us on this topic. It's VSBA, Vermont Superintendent Association, Vermont Principals Association, the Agency of Education, the Human Rights Commission, and the Act One Working Group, Vermont Special Ed Administrators Group, the Vermont Curriculum Leaders Group, Outright Vermont, Vermont Legal Aid, and the Education Justice Coalition. All of them have said, this is so important to our state and our communities. We are sending someone to you for 2 full days to go through this training. That is going to be so informative to us, because the next steps after that training is done is then to take the workbook and modify it to fit Vermont. So there might be subtle language differences between Arizona and Vermont, likely, right? That's what our next step is going to be, is to really walk through that workbook and make it fit to Vermont. Make sure that the examples we're giving resonate with people who live here and do this hard work. That, when we talk about data, that we're pointing to the types of data that you can access here in Vermont. So as you can see, it's a multi-step process that we will be going through, but we're well on our way. When we were talking about the 1 through 5, how ready are you? I was doing a little internal self-analysis of where's the SBA. And I'd say we're probably at the 3. We're working really hard. We have a goal, we have some strategies, and we're working really hard to now support our members through their journey. So did I tell you everything I wanted to tell you? Just relating to equity, I also wanted to make sure you know we have a model policy on district equity. So we have the recommended policy on our webpage. You could access that. And then, the last thing I wanted to mention is that once the conference is through, our planning in this project will begin immediately next week. And part of that, we are thinking about doing a pilot. So before we launched, put everything out there and send it all out across the state, we were thinking, wouldn't it be great to run through our Vermont curriculum once it's done with a group as a pilot? So we can learn before it's out there. You can inform us. We can make modifications. So if it's something you think your district might be interested in, please be watching for our requests for volunteers to run through a pilot with us. And I think that's probably going to be one of our first steps.
Yeah, and I just want to give kudos to Vermont because Julie and I, was my partner that will be coming out to training, and then Tracy Benson's also our associate executive director. We've done this work in Alabama. I've done some work in different states, Texas, for little bits and pieces. I've done this all over the country, and it really is the first curriculum. A few other states have used it to kind of kick off their curriculums, and so we're so excited to partner with Vermont because they are bringing all of those stakeholders that are external to help form the work of what's possible and how to make it aligned with what you all are doing. And I look forward to changing the workbook up to really fit Vermont, because it is different. Things are different. The priorities are different, or the circumstances may be different. And so I look forward to facilitate, but Sandra and her team are really on board and working to learn everything that they can. And I've just been really impressed with everybody that I've met with Vermont that are touching this work. And I think it's going to be a really great opportunity for any of the districts that want to take that on.
Awesome. And Nikki has been an invaluable resource to us ever since we met you. And after our training is done and our workbook we believe is ready to go, Nikki will continue to be available to us as a consultant moving forward as we roll it all out. So super exciting work going on with our staff of 4. And yeah, stay tuned. Please make sure you're watching for the weekly email. We'll be sending updates through that, and absolutely on our website as well. Yeah, I'm happy to answer.
Great equity website, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I was just wondering, I found the resources on the website super useful. But one thing that has come up again in our school like conversations in the district is hoping and wishing for more models about how to tackle these issues and really like schools that are racially quite homogenous, where the representation, the issues are just, play out differently. And so the strategies seem like they need to be tailored to these environments. And some more examples and kind of language and strategies for that kind of environment would be so helpful for us.
Absolutely.
I would use that slide it's kind of way back there, so I don't know if I can get there, but that influencer slide that I had, if you take nothing else, and I'll even send it in the full page form if anybody wants it. I think Sandra actually already has that, but it is what I think makes sense to a lot of people. Let me see if I can go back to it. Here we go. Slideshow from current slide. It's not doing it. Okay. But it talks about, yes, the race and ethnicity on the top, but if you have a community that doesn't have a lot of racial or ethnic diversity, there's so many things else on that list, so it is about identifying. And I bet you your schools can tell you, like, we have some kids that are struggling with basic needs. We have how many of our special education kids are still in need? They're not succeeding, or they're overrepresented in discipline. What can we do to address discipline in a different way? Because discipline's another thing that many districts have a one-size-fits-all approach to, which is not very equitable, especially when we're talking about the fact that some of our kids do have disabilities, or they do have trauma, which makes them more reactionary, or already kind of on that level of edge than maybe some of their peers. And then on top of that, you have either bias of unconscious bias of those that are disciplining, or unawareness of adolescent development. I mean, a lot of adults think that a 13-year-old should be able to process and think and act as if a 25-year-old or themselves, when they are cognitively just not developed yet to be able to do that. And if you don't have that awareness and understanding, it makes the empathy or the willingness to use a different strategy less successful. So it's really about looking at those other characteristics. And if you want to put, skip right past that or put the tape, focus on 4 or 5 that you think may be of influence to you, and then brainstorm around those.
Thank you.
Another question?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much, Nikki. I was wondering, going back to the foundational premises of equity. For the first one, do you have a working definition of student achievement or indicators of positive student outcomes?
We recently did a position paper that we did based on county meetings. So we went to every county and we had a conversation about what student achievement is to them. And we gave them a multi-choice kind of thing and then a fill in the answer. And what we found was that the majority of people, academic outcomes were amongst the bottom of the things that when they thought about student achievement. It was about feeling empowered to take on life as an adult. It was about being a well-balanced, emotionally stable person. It was about ability to work with different people and address challenging situations. Like those were the things that they identified as student achievement. And so I think that that's a conversation. When you have the equity conversation, you can say, we're going to talk about what is student achievement to us. Don't even start with the equity. What does student achievement mean to us? Right? And then, okay, it means these things. Are all of our students hitting those benchmarks? If not, we have some inequities. What do we do about them? And so I think that that's really a community thing. Some of the things that some of the districts in Arizona have done is to create what they call a portrait of a graduate or a portrait of student success. And they have things, our students will be able to do X, Y, and Z. And so I think that you could certainly Google some stuff and look at some things. And if you give your email and stuff to Sandra, I'll send you a couple of portraits of success or what other folks have done. But that's where the conversation starts, because then when everybody agrees that that's what student achievement is, and you didn't use the E word, but then you realize, hey, not everybody's achieving that. And what do we need to do to get that work done? The people that help pick that can go like, oh, I can see now why you're doing that. Because then you can go back and say, we are doing this, we're embedding stories with diverse faces because we realize that our kids don't get to see diverse faces in the classroom. And so it's important for them to be prepared and hear the stories of folks that they're going to encounter when they're in the world. And that seems less like you're trying to, shame my child, or you're trying to do that because they were part of, we do want our kids to be able to navigate in the world. And you're not doing this to be quote unquote woke or to fight a liberal agenda, but you're doing this because we asked you to make our kids prepared. And this is part of that.
Are we done? Like 2 minutes. Any last questions or thoughts or? Nikki, can you go to the slide where our contact info is? Can you progress? I think it's just one more slide and it's in here, but it's super tiny. But certainly feel free to reach out. I'm the equity lead for VSBA, so I'm helping to coordinate a lot of this. So feel free to reach out to me anytime. And then Nikki's got her contact information there as well. We recorded today, so we'll try to get this up on our website. So any of your colleagues, coworkers who want to hear about the conversation and learn a little bit about the framework, we'll have it up for you so they can listen in.
On azsba.org, that's our website. So the last part of my email is our website. If you put /equity, you'll be sent to our equity page. And we have a couple documents there on handling difficult conversations, equity in a divided community. So some resources around that if you are worried about how you could proceed in that. And some other tools, some example policies, but you already have a great one, but for other folks. And then if you follow me on LinkedIn, I will post articles and a lot of resources for folks. So I haven't been as active because I've been really busy, but I try to share as many resources or pieces that can help you think and consider in order for you to begin to build those muscles of thinking about things in different ways.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll see you November 7th.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.